The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Blackwood Technologies as Natalie Monroe stared at her computer screen, trying to ignore the way her heart skipped whenever Julian Blackwood walked past her desk. It was ridiculous, really. She was 26 years old, a respected marketing analyst with 3 years of stellar performance reviews, and yet she felt like a teenager with a crush every time her boss entered the room. "Natalie, do you have those campaign metrics ready?" Julian's voice broke through her thoughts, smooth and professional as always. She looked up to find him standing beside her desk, his dark hair slightly damp from the Seattle drizzle, his blue eyes focused on her with that intensity that made her stomach flip. "Just finishing the final analysis," she replied, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "The preliminary numbers are strong. The millennial demographic is responding especially well to the authenticity angle we pushed." Julian leaned over to look at her screen, and Natalie caught the scent of his cologne, something woodsy and clean that she'd come to associate with late nights at the office and early morning strategy sessions. She held her breath, willing herself not to lean closer. "Excellent work," he said, and she could hear the genuine appreciation in his tone. "You've got an instinct for this that most people take decades to develop. The board is going to love this." Natalie felt warmth spread through her chest at his praise, immediately followed by frustration with herself. She couldn't keep doing this, reading meaning into every compliment, analyzing every interaction for signs of something more than professional respect. Julian Blackwood was her boss, the CEO of a rapidly growing tech company, and completely off limits. She'd learned about boundaries the hard way. Her grandmother, who'd raised her after her parents divorced when she was 8, had drilled into her the importance of maintaining professional integrity. "Never mix business with pleasure, Natalie," she'd said 1,000 times. "The moment you blur those lines, you lose respect, and respect is everything." For 3 years, Natalie had followed that advice religiously. She'd watched as other employees had whispered about Julian's availability. He was single, successful, and undeniably attractive, but she'd kept her distance. She'd dated other people, though none of the relationships had lasted more than a few months. She told herself it was because she was focused on her career, not because every man she met seemed somehow less interesting than the one she worked for. "Natalie?" Julian's voice pulled her back to the present. "Are you all right? You seem distracted lately." "I'm fine," she said quickly, too quickly. "Just tired. The product launch has been consuming all my energy." Julian studied her for a moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her carefully constructed facade. "You've been putting in a lot of overtime," he said. "Maybe you should take a few days off after the launch event." "You've earned it. I don't need time off. I need to make sure this launch is perfect." A slight smile curved Julian's lips. "That's what I appreciate about you. You care about the work as much as I do. Most people are just going through the motions. But you actually understand what we're building here." There it was again. That connection. That moment of recognition that felt like more than just employer and employee. Natalie forced herself to look away, to focus on her computer screen where the numbers blurred together. "I should get back to this," she said. "The presentation needs to be ready by morning." Julian hesitated, and she sensed he wanted to say something more. Instead, he straightened and nodded. "Don't stay too late. The launch will be a success regardless of whether you work yourself into exhaustion." After he walked away, Natalie let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. This was getting worse, not better. Maybe she should start looking for another job, put some distance between herself and this impossible situation. The launch event was scheduled for Friday evening at a trendy venue in downtown Seattle. Blackwood Technologies was unveiling their new project management software designed to revolutionize how small businesses coordinated remote teams. Natalie had poured her heart into the marketing campaign, and everything needed to be perfect. By Thursday afternoon, she was running on coffee and pure adrenaline. She'd been at the office since 6 that morning, coordinating with the event planners, finalizing the promotional materials, and managing the social media strategy. When her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel Kim, her best friend and colleague in the sales department, she almost ignored it. "Rachel. Girl, you need to see this. Conference room, now." Frowning, Natalie saved her work and headed down the hall. Rachel was waiting outside the glass-walled conference room, her expression a mix of excitement and concern. "What's going on?" Natalie asked. "Just look," Rachel said, pointing through the glass. Inside the conference room, Julian stood with a tall blonde woman that Natalie didn't recognize. They were laughing about something, and the woman had her hand on Julian's arm in a way that seemed far too familiar. Natalie felt something twist in her chest, something that felt dangerously like jealousy. "Who is she?" "Victoria Sterling," Rachel said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Apparently she's an old friend of Julian's. They went to Stanford together. Word is she's some hotshot venture capitalist looking to invest in the company." Natalie watched as Julian smiled at Victoria, the same warm smile he'd given her earlier that morning. Except it meant nothing. It was just Julian being professional, being charming, being the CEO who knew how to work a room and win people over. "Why did you think I needed to see this?" Natalie asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral. Rachel gave her a knowing look. "Because I've seen the way you look at him, Nat, and I thought maybe seeing him with someone else would help you remember why that's a bad idea." "I don't look at him any particular way," Natalie protested. "Sure you don't. And I'm the Queen of England." Rachel linked her arm through Natalie's and started walking her back toward their desks. "Look, I get it. Julian's gorgeous, brilliant, and apparently a genuinely decent human being, which is a rare combination. But he's also your boss, and you're too smart to throw away your career for some impossible fantasy." "I know that," Natalie said, hating how defensive she sounded. "I'm not going to do anything stupid." "Good. Because the company rumor mill is vicious, and the last thing you need is people thinking you slept your way to your position." The word stung because Natalie had the same fear. She'd worked incredibly hard to get where she was, taking evening classes to finish her master's degree while working full-time, volunteering for every challenging project, proving herself again and again. The thought of all that effort being dismissed because of some perceived impropriety made her feel physically ill. Back at her desk, Natalie threw herself into work with renewed determination. She would make this launch perfect. She would prove her value to the company had nothing to do with her feelings for Julian Blackwood. She would maintain her boundaries and her professionalism, no matter what. The afternoon passed in a blur of emails and phone calls. By 6 o'clock, most of the office had cleared out, but Natalie was still refining the presentation slides for the launch event. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice Julian approaching until he was standing right beside her desk. "You're still here," he said, and there was something in his tone that made her look up sharply. "So are you," she countered. "I live here." "Apparently." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she'd come to recognize. "Natalie, I need to talk to you about something." Her heart jumped into her throat. "If this is about the Henderson account, I already contacted their team about the contract revisions. It's not about work." Julian pulled over a chair and sat down, bringing himself to her eye level. At least not directly about work. Natalie felt her pulse accelerate. This was it. This was the moment she'd been dreading and secretly hoping for in equal measure. "What is it?" Julian seemed to struggle with his words, a rare occurrence for someone usually so articulate. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this for months now. Hell, probably for years. But seeing Victoria today made me realize I can't keep putting it off." "Victoria Sterling." The name came out sharper than Natalie intended. "She asked me to dinner," Julian said, watching Natalie's reaction carefully. "Nothing romantic. She wants to discuss the investment opportunity. But when she asked, the only thing I could think was that I wished it was you instead." The world seemed to tilt slightly. Natalie gripped the armrests of her chair, trying to process what she was hearing. "Julian, you can't say things like that." "Why not? Because I'm your boss? Because it's unprofessional?" There was frustration in his voice now, mixed with something that sounded like desperation. "I followed every rule, Natalie. I've maintained appropriate distance. I've never shown you any favoritism, never made you uncomfortable. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel what I feel." "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Natalie said, standing up so quickly her chair rolled backward. "This is why there are rules, why boundaries exist. Because the moment they're crossed, everything gets complicated." Maybe complicated isn't always bad, Julian said, standing to face her. Maybe sometimes it's worth the risk. Easy for you to say. You're the CEO. Your reputation isn't the one that will be destroyed. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Julian's expression shifted from hope to understanding. That's what you're worried about. What people will think. Of course, that's what I'm worried about. Natalie's voice rose despite her attempts to stay calm. I've worked so hard to be taken seriously, to build my career on merit. If people find out about any feelings between us, everything I've accomplished will be questioned. Your accomplishments speak for themselves, Julian said firmly. Anyone who works with you knows how talented you are. You don't understand. You can't understand. Natalie gathered her things, suddenly desperate to escape this conversation. I need to go. Natalie, wait. But she was already moving toward the elevator, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. Behind her, she heard Julian call her name again, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Because if she turned around, if she looked at him one more time, she might do something they'd both regret. The elevator ride down felt endless. When the doors finally opened to the lobby, Natalie stepped out into the Seattle night, where the rain had finally stopped and the city lights reflected in the wet pavement. She took a deep breath of the cool air, trying to steady herself. Her phone buzzed with a text. Against her better judgment, she looked at it. Julian, I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. That was never my intention, but I meant what I said. I'll see you tomorrow for the launch. Natalie stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the reply button. 1,000 responses ran through her mind, but none of them felt right. Finally, she put the phone away without responding and started walking toward the bus stop. Tomorrow was the launch. Tomorrow she would have to face Julian and pretend nothing had changed. Tomorrow she would have to smile and be professional while her heart was breaking. But tonight, just for tonight, she let herself admit the truth she'd been avoiding for 3 years. She was in love with Julian Blackwood, and it was going to destroy everything she'd worked for. The morning of the launch event arrived with deceptive calm. Natalie had barely slept, replaying Julian's confession over and over in her mind until the words lost all meaning. She dressed carefully in a charcoal blazer and cream silk blouse, professional armor for the battle ahead. Today wasn't about her feelings or Julian's impossible declaration. Today was about proving that Blackwood Technology's new software would change the industry. She arrived at the venue 2 hours early, clipboard in hand, ready to micromanage every detail. The space was perfect. An industrial loft in Pioneer Square with exposed brick walls and modern lighting that would photograph beautifully for the press coverage she'd arranged. Caterers were setting up the bar, tech crew testing the projection system, and Natalie threw herself into the logistics with desperate focus. The slide transitions need to be smoother, she told the AV technician. Can we adjust the lighting on the stage? It's washing out the backdrop. You've got everything under control, as always. Natalie's spine stiffened at Julian's voice. She turned to find him standing a few feet away, dressed in a navy suit that made his eyes look impossibly blue. He looked tired, she noticed, like he'd slept as poorly as she had. Just doing my job, she said, keeping her tone professional. About last night. We should focus on the launch, Natalie interrupted, unable to handle another emotional conversation. We can talk about personal matters later, or never. Never would be good, too. Julian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. You're right. The company comes first. It always has. There was something bitter in his tone that made Natalie's chest ache, but she pushed the feeling aside. The next 2 hours passed in controlled chaos. Rachel arrived with the sales team, setting up their demonstration stations. The catering staff finished their preparations. Early guests began trickling in, tech journalists, potential clients, industry influencers that Natalie had personally courted for weeks, and Victoria Sterling, who walked in like she owned the place, immediately gravitating toward Julian with a familiarity that made Natalie's stomach clench. You've got to stop torturing yourself, Rachel murmured, appearing at Natalie's elbow. She's just a friend. I'm not torturing myself. I'm working. Right. That's why you're gripping that clipboard like it personally offended you. Rachel gently pried the board from Natalie's white-knuckled hands. Breathe. The event will be perfect because you made it perfect. Now go touch up your makeup and put on your game face. Cameras will be here in 15 minutes. Natalie escaped to the bathroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She looked composed, professional, exactly like the successful marketing analyst she'd worked so hard to become. No one looking at her would guess that her heart was breaking. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Julian, "Please don't avoid me all night. We're a team, remember?" Before she could respond, Rachel burst into the bathroom. "Nat, we've got a problem. The demo software is glitching. Thomas is having a meltdown, and we need Julian, but he's stuck with some reporter from TechCrunch." Natalie snapped into crisis mode immediately. Thomas Blackwood, Julian's younger brother and the company's CFO, was brilliant with numbers but terrible under pressure. She found him near the demonstration stations, his face flushed with panic. "The interface keeps freezing," Thomas said, gesturing frantically at the laptop. "If we can't show the software working smoothly, the whole launch is ruined. Let me see." Natalie leaned over the computer, her mind racing through possibilities. She'd spent enough late nights watching the development team work to understand the basics. "It's a memory issue. You're running too many applications in the background. Close these 3 programs and restart." Thomas followed her instructions, and the software loaded perfectly. He let out a breath of relief. "You're a lifesaver. I don't know what we'd do without you." "Just part of the job," Natalie said. But she felt a warm glow of satisfaction. This was why she was good at what she did, not because of any feelings for Julian, but because she was competent and quick-thinking. The launch event itself was a triumph. Julian's keynote speech was compelling, highlighting how their software would empower small businesses and remote teams. The demonstrations ran flawlessly. Journalists asked exactly the right questions, clearly impressed by what they were seeing. Natalie watched from the back of the room, allowing herself a moment of pride. She'd done this. Her marketing strategy had brought these people here, had generated this buzz. After the formal presentation, the evening shifted into networking mode. Natalie worked the room with practiced ease, introducing clients to sales representatives, ensuring journalists had all the information they needed, smoothing over any awkward moments with the social grace her grandmother had taught her. She was talking with a reporter from Wired when she felt someone watching her. She glanced up to find Julian across the room, his attention focused entirely on her despite being mid-conversation with a group of potential investors. Their eyes met and the connection was electric, a current that seemed to arc across the crowded space. Victoria Sterling noticed. Natalie saw the blonde woman follow Julian's gaze, saw understanding dawn on her elegant features. Victoria leaned in and said something to Julian, who visibly tensed before responding. Whatever he said made Victoria laugh, but her eyes were sharp when she looked at Natalie again. "Excuse me?" Natalie said to the journalist, suddenly needing air. She made her way to the balcony overlooking the Seattle waterfront, where the evening breeze was cool against her flushed skin. She'd been there only a few minutes when the door opened behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know it was Julian. "You should be inside," she said. "Those investors are ready to write significant checks. They can wait." Julian moved to stand beside her at the railing, maintaining a careful distance. "Thomas told me what you did. That quick thinking saved us from a disaster. It was nothing. Basic troubleshooting. It wasn't nothing, and we both know it." Julian's voice was warm, genuine. "You're the reason tonight was successful. Your marketing strategy, your attention to detail, your ability to handle crises, this company wouldn't be where it is without you." Natalie's throat tightened. "Don't do this. Don't make this harder than it already is." "What if I don't want to make it easy?" Julian turned to face her fully. "What if I'm tired of pretending?" "Julian, we talked about this." "No, you talked about your fears. But you never told me if you feel what I feel." He took a step closer, and Natalie's heart hammered against her ribs. "Tell me I'm alone in this. Tell me you don't lie awake at night thinking about me the way I think about you. Tell me you don't notice every time I walk into a room, don't feel this pull between us. Tell me I'm crazy, Natalie, and I'll walk away." She should lie. She knew she should lie. Instead, The truth spilled out like water from a broken dam. I can't tell you that, but it doesn't matter what I feel. The consequences. To hell with the consequences, Julian said, and suddenly he was close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. I've spent my entire life being careful, being strategic, building this company brick by brick. And you know what? None of it means anything if I can't have you. You don't mean that. The company is everything to you. You're wrong. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating tenderness. I thought the company was everything. But then you walked into my office 3 years ago with that awful portfolio presentation. It wasn't awful, Natalie protested weakly. It was terrible. Your design sense was non-existent. Julian smiled, and despite everything, she found herself smiling back. But you were so confident, so determined. You told me my marketing strategy was outdated and my target demographic was all wrong. And I was furious and impressed in equal measure. I almost got fired that day. I almost kissed you that day. The confession hung in the air between them. I've wanted you from the beginning, Natalie. I just convinced myself that professionalism mattered more. But seeing Victoria today made me realize I'm done lying to myself. What does Victoria have to do with this? She asked if there was someone in my life, and I said no because technically there isn't. But there should be. There should be you. Natalie felt tears prickling at her eyes. This is insane. We work together. You're my boss. The power dynamic alone. Then I'll step down. I'll make Thomas CEO and take a different role in the company. Or I'll leave entirely and start something new. I don't care, Natalie. Whatever it takes to make this ethical, to make you feel safe, I'll do it. You can't just throw away everything you've built. Watch me. Julian's intensity was almost frightening. I've spent 3 years watching you date other people, pretending it didn't kill me every time. I've maintained perfect professionalism while wanting to grab you and kiss you senseless. I'm done pretending. I'm done being careful. I want you, and I think you want me too. Of course I want you. The words burst out of her, years of suppressed emotion finally breaking free. I've wanted you since the day I started working here. But wanting something doesn't make it right. Why not? Julian challenged. We're both adults. We're both single. The only thing stopping us is fear. Fear is smart. Fear is what keeps us from making catastrophic mistakes. But even as she said it, Natalie knew she was losing the battle. Julian was too close, his eyes too intense, the pull between them too strong. Let me prove I'm not a mistake, Julian said softly. Give me one chance, one real date, away from the office, away from all the complications. If at the end of the night you still think this is wrong, I'll accept it, and we'll go back to being professional colleagues. And if I don't? Natalie whispered. Then we figure it out together. His hand slid around to cup the back of her neck, and she shivered at the contact. Please, Natalie. I'm begging you. Give us a chance. She knew she should say no. Every logical bone in her body was screaming at her to walk away, to protect her career and her reputation. But standing on that balcony with Seattle spread out below them, and Julian looking at her like she was the only woman in the world, logic seemed very far away. One date, she heard herself say. But not in Seattle, somewhere nobody knows us. Relief and joy transformed Julian's face. I'll arrange everything. This weekend. I promise you won't regret this. Before Natalie could respond, the balcony door opened and Rachel appeared, looking frazzled. Sorry to interrupt, but the investors from Vancouver want to meet with both of you. And Thomas is fielding questions about the pricing model that he really shouldn't answer without you, Julian. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Rachel's knowing look said she'd seen more than enough, but she was professional enough to pretend otherwise. I'll tell them you'll be right in. After Rachel left, Natalie and Julian stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Julian smiled, that real, unguarded smile that made him look years younger. This weekend, he said. I'll text you the details. "This is crazy," Natalie said, but she was smiling too. The best things usually are. They returned to the party separately, maintaining careful distance for the rest of the evening. But Natalie felt like everyone could see the change in her, like her secret was written across her forehead in neon letters. She caught Victoria Sterling watching them both with speculative interest, and Thomas gave his brother a strange look when Julian returned to the investor group. Rachel cornered her near the end of the night. "Please tell me you didn't agree to something stupid." "Define stupid." Nat. Rachel's expression was concerned. "I love you, you know that, and I think Julian's a good guy, but this could blow up in your face in spectacular fashion." "I know," Natalie admitted, "but I have to at least try. I can't keep wondering what if for the rest of my life. Just promise me you'll be careful, and that you'll make him prove he's serious before you risk everything." "I promise." But as Natalie watched Julian across the room, saw him glance her way with barely contained longing, she wondered if she was capable of being careful anymore. Something had shifted tonight. Some carefully constructed wall had crumbled, and she wasn't sure if she had the strength or the desire to rebuild it. The launch event was declared a massive success. By the time the venue closed at midnight, they had secured 3 major contracts and generated enough media buzz to guarantee weeks of positive coverage. Thomas was ecstatic, already calculating projected revenue increases. Rachel was planning follow-up campaigns, and Julian was looking at Natalie like she'd hung the moon. As they gathered their things to leave, Julian brushed past her, slipping a piece of paper into her hand. She waited until she was in the cab home to unfold it. Portland, Saturday afternoon. I'll pick you up at noon. Wear something comfortable and bring an overnight bag. Trust me? Natalie stared at the note, her heart racing. This was really happening. She was really going to risk everything, her career, her reputation, the careful life she'd built, for one weekend with Julian Blackwood. She pulled out her phone and typed a single word: yes. The response came immediately. You won't regret this. I promise. But as the cab carried her through the Seattle night, Natalie couldn't shake the feeling that she already did. Not because she didn't want Julian, but because she wanted him too much, and wanting something that intensely rarely ended well. Saturday morning arrived with golden September sunshine that felt like a blessing or a curse, depending on Natalie's moment-to-moment panic level. She'd changed outfits 4 times before settling on dark jeans, a soft burgundy sweater, and ankle boots, casual but put together. The overnight bag sitting by her door felt like evidence of a crime she hadn't yet committed. Her phone buzzed at exactly noon. I'm downstairs. Natalie took one last look at her apartment, her safe, predictable space that represented everything she'd built on her own, and grabbed her bag. In the elevator, she caught her reflection in the polished doors. She looked terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Julian was waiting in a sleek black SUV, and when she climbed in, his smile was so genuine it made her chest ache. He wasn't in his usual suits. Instead, he wore jeans and a dark Henley that made him look younger, more approachable. You came, he said, as if he'd genuinely doubted she would. I said I would. Natalie buckled her seatbelt, trying to calm her racing heart. Where exactly are we going? Portland. There's an inn I know, tucked away in the mountains outside the city. No tech conferences, no business associates, no one who knows us, just us. The 3-hour drive passed in surprising ease. Away from the office, without the weight of professional boundaries, conversation flowed naturally. Julian told her about growing up in a middle-class family in Sacramento, how his father's small business had gone bankrupt when he was 16, how that failure had driven him to build something that couldn't be taken away. That's why Thomas joined the company, Julian explained as they crossed into Oregon. He watched Dad lose everything, and he wanted to make sure the numbers would always add up for us. Sometimes I think he cares more about the financial stability than the actual innovation. He's protecting you, Natalie said. That's what family does. What about your family? You never talk about them much, Natalie hesitated, old pain surfacing. Not much to tell. My parents divorced when I was 8. Mom remarried and started a new family. I didn't really fit into that picture. Dad drank himself to death by the time I was 15. My grandmother took me in, raised me on a seamstress's salary and sheer determination. Julian reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I'm sorry. Don't be. Grandma Monroe taught me everything that matters. Work ethic, integrity, self-respect. She made me promise I'd never depend on anyone else for my success. Natalie looked down at their joined hands. Which is why this terrifies me. Because being with me feels like depending on someone. Because being with you makes people question whether my success is really mine. Julian was quiet for a moment, processing. I never thought about it that way. The privilege of being a man in tech. Most men don't. Natalie squeezed his hand. But I need you to understand what I'm risking. It's not just a job. It's my entire identity, everything I've proven about myself. Then we'll prove it again, Julian said firmly. Together. I'll make sure everyone knows your value has nothing to do with our relationship. The inn was perfect. A renovated farmhouse surrounded by pine trees with views of Mount Hood in the distance. The owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, greeted them warmly without prying questions. Their room was cozy with exposed beams and a fireplace, the kind of place that felt a world away from Seattle's tech scene. Separate beds, Julian noted, gesturing to the twin beds on opposite sides of the room. I meant what I said. No pressure. Something in Natalie's chest loosened. Thank you. They spent the afternoon exploring the small mountain town, walking through farmers' markets and local galleries. Julian bought her a hand-thrown ceramic mug because she'd admired the glaze, and she felt absurdly touched by the simple gesture. They had lunch at a family-owned Italian restaurant where the owner's grandmother made fresh pasta, and Julian told embarrassing stories about Thomas's teenage years that made Natalie laugh until her sides hurt. It was so normal, so easy, that she almost forgot why they'd needed to escape Seattle in the first place. Almost. As evening fell, they returned to the inn. Mrs. Chen had left wine and cheese in their room, and they sat by the fireplace as the temperature dropped outside. Tell me something nobody else knows, Julian said, refilling her wine glass. Something real. Natalie thought for a moment. I'm terrified I'm not as smart as everyone thinks I am. That someday people will realize I've just been really good at faking competence. Imposter syndrome? Julian said with recognition. I have it too. Every board meeting, I'm convinced they're going to realize I'm making half of this up as I go. You? You're the most confident person I know. That's the performance. Julian's expression was vulnerable in the firelight. The truth is, I'm scared all the time. Scared I'll make the wrong decision and tank the company. Scared I'll let down all the people depending on me. Scared that everything I've built could disappear tomorrow. Natalie shifted closer, drawn by his honesty. Is that why you work so hard? To outrun the fear? Maybe. Or maybe I just didn't have anything else worth slowing down for. His eyes met hers. Until now. The kiss, when it came, felt inevitable. Gentle at first, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, Natalie melted into it, her hands sliding up to frame his face as the kiss deepened into something hungrier, more urgent. They moved to one of the beds, a tangle of limbs and whispered confessions. Julian was tender and attentive, taking his time, making her feel cherished in a way she'd never experienced. And when they finally came together, it felt less like crossing a forbidden line and more like coming home. Afterward, they lay wrapped in each other, the firelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. Natalie traced lazy patterns on Julian's chest, feeling simultaneously peaceful and terrified. What happens Monday? She asked quietly. Monday, we figure out how to make this work. Julian pressed a kiss to her forehead. I meant what I said about restructuring. Thomas could be CEO, he's been preparing for it anyway. I could shift into a chief innovation officer role or something. Remove the direct reporting relationship. Your board would never approve that. You're the face of the company. Then we'll tell HR and implement protocols. Transparency. Disclosed relationships. Whatever it takes to make this ethical. Natalie wanted to believe it could be that simple. But she'd seen office romances implode before, watched careers destroyed by whispers and speculation. People will talk regardless. Let them talk. Your work speaks for itself. You have to say that. You're biased now. Julian rolled over to face her fully, his expression serious. Natalie, you are the most talented marketing analyst I've ever worked with. You have instincts that can't be taught and a work ethic that puts everyone else to shame. If people want to reduce your accomplishments to who you're sleeping with, that's their failure of imagination, not yours. She wanted to believe him. She wanted so badly to believe that they could make this work without destroying everything she'd built. But doubt gnawed at her. The weekend passed too quickly, a stolen bubble of time where they could pretend the real world didn't exist. They hiked through pine forests, had dinner at a winery, spent hours talking about everything and nothing. Julian told her about his dreams for the company, not just growth, but meaningful innovation that would actually help people. Natalie shared her secret ambition to eventually lead an entire marketing department, maybe even start her own consulting firm someday. You should do it, Julian encouraged. You'd be incredible. Maybe after a few more years of experience. Or maybe now. You're ready, Natalie. Don't let fear hold you back. Sunday evening arrived with depressing inevitability. As they drove back to Seattle, Natalie felt the weight of reality settling over her like a heavy blanket. Tomorrow they would walk into the office and everything would be different. The question was whether different would be better or catastrophically worse. We should probably talk about logistics, she said as they crossed back into Washington. How do we handle this at work? Carefully, professionally. Julian's hand found hers again. We disclose to HR first thing Monday. We keep our personal and professional lives separate as much as possible, and we prove through our actions that our relationship doesn't compromise our judgment. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like a plan. So why did Natalie still feel like she was walking toward a cliff edge? Julian dropped her off at her apartment building at 9. The kiss goodbye was sweet and lingering, full of promise and trepidation. I'll see you tomorrow, he said. We'll face it together. But as Natalie rode the elevator up to her apartment, she checked her phone and felt her stomach drop. 15 missed calls from Rachel. 10 text messages, each more urgent than the last. Rachel, where are you? Rachel, Nat, call me. It's important. Rachel, people are asking questions about you and Julian. Rachel, Victoria Sterling said something to someone and now it's all over the office gossip chain. Rachel, this is bad. Call me ASAP. With shaking hands, Natalie called Rachel back. Where the hell have you been? Rachel answered immediately, her voice tight with stress. I've been trying to reach you all weekend. I was away. What happened? Victoria Sterling happened. She apparently told her assistant that she saw you and Julian together on the balcony at the launch, having what looked like a very intimate conversation. And her assistant told someone in sales who told someone else, and now the entire company is gossiping about whether you and Julian are sleeping together. The room spun. Natalie sat down hard on her couch. Oh, God, it gets worse. Thomas Blackwood heard the rumors and confronted Victoria about it. There was apparently a scene, and now Thomas is demanding Julian address it in tomorrow's executive meeting. This can't be happening. Nat, you need to get ahead of this. If you and Julian really are together, you need to disclose it to HR before someone files a complaint about favoritism or hostile work environment or God knows what else. We were going to. Tomorrow morning, we had a plan. Tomorrow morning might be too late. The rumor mill is vicious, and people are already questioning every project you've worked on, every promotion you've received. I heard someone in accounting say that your raise last year must have been because you were warming the boss's bed. Natalie felt bile rise in her throat. This was her worst nightmare coming true. Everything she'd worked for, reduced to crude speculation and knowing looks. What do I do? She whispered. Rachel's voice softened. Do you love him? Is this real or was it just a weekend thing? I don't know. It's real, but it's also terrifying and maybe a huge mistake. Then you need to decide if he's worth fighting for. Because make no mistake, Nat, if you stay with Julian, you're going to have to fight. Fight the gossip, fight the assumptions, fight to prove yourself all over again. And it's going to be brutal. After they hung up, Natalie sat in her dark apartment, Julian's scent still clinging to her sweater, and felt the walls closing in. Her phone buzzed with a text from Julian. Julian, made it home. Still thinking about this weekend. Thank you for trusting me. She should tell him about the office gossip, warn him about what they were walking into tomorrow. Instead, she stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard, unable to form a response, because suddenly she realized that Rachel was right. The question wasn't whether people would talk or whether it would be difficult. The question was whether Julian was worth losing everything for. And despite the perfect weekend, despite the connection they'd shared, Natalie wasn't sure she knew the answer.